Your Excellency Vice Minister Liao, President Jin, Vice Minister Kouchouk, Vice President Ferro, esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, colleagues, good afternoon. Welcome to this launch watch event on the dissemination of the best practices and case studies on the climate-smart connectivity infrastructure. I'm Zhongjing, Chief Executive Officer of the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance. I will host the opening session for you. Before we begin, I would like to thank our co-organizers, China Ministry of Finance, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the World Resources Institute for making this event possible. The importance of connectivity is rising. The global logistics is projected to reach $17 trillion in market value in the next 10 years. But this rapid growth is threatened by the intensifying climate change, and there's no immunity in the world. Who could imagine that weather conditions thousands of miles away, for example, in the Caribbean, could have impact on the manufacturers in China? Yet it's true. Extreme drought has enforced Panama Canal to significantly reduce its daily traffic, causing a long queue of container ships to wait for days and even weeks to bring billions of dollars of goods from China to the east coast of the United States. Overdue delivery has resulted in actual cost and made supply chains vulnerable. So you can see connectivity and climate change are indeed deeply linked. In Asia and Africa, it's urgent to connect clean energy produced in the renewable rich countries to renewable deficit ones. It's not only to reduce carbon emissions, but also to enhance energy security and energy access to the poor in remote rural areas. This is what we are doing with our partners in Egypt to support the transmission of excess renewable energy from Egypt to its neighboring countries. So talking about MCDF, we are a multilateral financial mechanism designed to promote connectivity and infrastructure investment through partnerships. We support developing countries, international financial institutions, and new partners in addressing sustainability challenges, which will impact the infrastructure cross-border investment following international standards. And climate change is one dimension in this context. Thanks to the strong support and partnerships of our 7 donor countries and 11 international financial members, we have in the past 2 years supported projects in the sectors of energy, transport, and telecommunications with $22 million in grants, as well as capacity in nearly 20 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It's expected to mobilize $6.6 billion in connectivity investment. So we hope that this investment could align with the Paris Agreement, which, according to our estimate, 55% will go to this area. In addition to the support for connectivity to the project operation and the capacity building, we also promote the knowledge sharing on standards, best practices, and case studies pertaining to cross-border infrastructure. We co-organized with the Egyptian Ministry of Finance, AIIB, Islamic Development Bank, the World Bank, Vulnerable 20 Group, and the WRI 5 workshops last year that explored ways to promote climate resilience and carbon emission reductions in the cross-border infrastructure. We covered 20 topics on climate mitigation and adaptation by sharing 23 case studies around the world with over 500 participants from 65 countries and 23 international organizations. So today we launched this report by spotlighting 7 lessons learned. We try very hard to make it as readable as possible, so it's not very thick. We hope you could have time to have a look. And it will be helpful to you. The author will present details to you later. So with this, let's turn to our distinguished opening speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Liao, Vice Minister of Finance of China. Mr. Liao has comprehensive experience in the financial sector of China. He previously served as both Deputy Director of the Office of the Central Commission for Finance and Economy, as well as Vice Minister of Finance of China. He also worked as the Director General in the Office of the Central Commission for Finance and Economy and held senior positions with China Banking Regulatory Commission and the Bank of China, among other leadership roles. So, Vice Minister, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wang Zhongjing. So, Vice Minister Kouchouk, President Liqun, Vice President Ferro, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. So it gives me a great pleasure to join today's workshop. On behalf of the Chinese Ministry of Finance and Minister Fang, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. So I wish to take today's occasion to share 3 observations with you. So first, the climate change is increasingly emerging as an important factor in macroeconomic analysis. So it's widely acknowledged the macroeconomic analysis often largely overlooked the factors such as climate change and the demographic shift due to their slow-moving nature. However, with damage caused by climate change become more visible, there is a growing recognition that climate change as one of the global challenges bears both on the short-term economic recovery and the long-term sustainable development. So therefore, climate issues are increasingly becoming a critical factor to be taken into consideration in macroeconomic analysis today. To tackle the climate issues, it might be a more uncertain, slower, bumpier journey, but we believe the climate-smart connectivity infrastructure could be one of the solutions. So earlier I read the MCDF's report, the climate-smart connectivity infrastructure best practices and case studies. I fully agree with the 7 lessons identified in it, so which covers from getting basics right, designing for uncertainty, coordination, decision-making process, financial modeling, investment and private sector involvement, etc. So those are the key aspects on which every country needs focused in the course of a profound green transition. So that leads to my second point. So green transformation is continuously making progress in China. In the year of 2020, so President Xi Jinping announced the goals of carbon peaking by 2030 and the carbon neutrality by 2060, also known as the 30-60 goals. So China is implementing a national strategy of actively responding to climate changes, so which includes the clear goal, the serious implementation, and great coordination among government agencies and every line of businesses. So in recent decades, China has achieved noticeable progress in industrial structure, energy efficiency, and green energy supply. I give you an illustration here. So according to one recent estimation of international investment equity firm, out of China's GDP growth over 3% in 2022, so green economy contributed 3.1%, digital economy contributed 2%, the rest of the economy contribute 1.6%, while the property sectors contribute a negative 3.7%. So this is a vivid demonstration of Chinese transformation in which the green economy is taking up more weights in GDP. So at the same time, the total volume of the green financial markets has increased from 8.9 trillion renminbi in 2018 to 30 trillion RMB by the end of the first half of this year. So since 2012, so the Chinese government has allocated a total of 100 billion renminbi from central budget to invest in environmental-related infrastructure, which is accompanied by about 1 trillion RMB investment from local governments and the private sector. So based upon all this, we firmly believe that the structure of China's economy will be further optimized, featuring greener and more digital-based growth. The third things I want to discuss is based on the MCDF's report I mentioned previously, I suggest we could focus more on 3 key areas, so namely standards, incentives, and capacity to develop climate-smart connectivity infrastructure. Let me explain. Standards, so I mean the MCDF and the international financial institutions should promote the formulation of standards and KPIs, so based on the practice of various countries. This will largely help developing countries to do the relevant projects in the right way. Second, incentives. So in order to bring government, multilateral, and bilateral development partners and the private sector together, so we need to establish an effective mechanism for risk allocations and benefit sharing. So capacity, for a developing country, its own internal capacity is the key. So we should do as much as we can to give them help. So ladies and gentlemen, so President Xi Jinping announced 8 major steps China will take to support high-quality Belt Road cooperation at the opening ceremony of the 3rd Belt Road Summit. So building a multi-dimensional Belt and Road connectivity network and promoting green development are among them. So we are prepared to work with all parties in these issues. So to conclude, I wish the workshop a great success. Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Vice Minister Liao, for your insights and elaborations on the incredible achievement China has made in the green transformation. And also thank you for your reading this report. And we take note about your observations and the guidance on the standard incentives and capacity building. So we hope MCDF can continue to work with China in this agenda. So our next speaker is Mr. Ahmed Kouchouk, Egyptian Vice Minister of Finance for Fiscal Policies and Institutional Reform. Vice Minister Kouchouk plays a key role in designing and implementing Egypt's macroeconomic policies and reforms, especially its fiscal and debt policies. He's a professional economist and policy advisor with more than 18 years of experience. He served as a board member of the Central Bank of Egypt, worked as a senior economist for the World Bank, and in various other senior positions with the Egyptian Finance Ministry. Vice Minister Kouchouk, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. And of course, I'm very also proud to be a director at the AIIB. It's something that also I'm very proud of. Dear Excellencies and Vice Minister, President Chen, of course, Vice President Manuela, it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. And before reading the few points I have here, I just very, very delighted to see an idea turning into reality and into flesh, and something that we can today celebrate. This idea of looking and searching for good ideas, for lesson learned about something that is very important, an idea that came few months ago and was co-hosted and supported by a lot of the institutions attending today. And we turned this into a reality, and now we have a good publication that hopefully will be also an annual publication and something that can be done by everybody so that we can bring more good ideas and cases and learn from it jointly to deal with the very important challenge that we'll be talking about today. But it's a pleasure to be here today and to deliver one of the opening remarks for the panel discussion that will be held today. Please allow me to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation for the co-organizers of this event, the Ministry of Finance of China, AIIB, MCDF, and also WRI. It has been just over a year since we held our workshop series on mobilizing finance for climate-smart connectivity infrastructure that concluded with COP27 presidency official event during the Finance Day, when the Egyptian Ministry of Finance, MCDF, AIIB, along with other very important development partners, the World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and WRI jointly organized a high-level seminar with very good participation by ministers, leaders of multilateral development banks, and private sector representatives to discuss the financing of climate-smart connectivity infrastructure. This rich process led us to the compilation of this innovative publication, which narrate and bring best practices and showcase studies. And of course, I read it with a lot of pride and a lot of happiness. This flagship publication ensures that best practices and lessons from different countries across all continents are well documented and hence can be replicated and even improved. I believe mobilizing climate finance directed to good projects need to be complemented by practical global lessons related to climate issues at large and, of course, climate-smart connectivity, the topic that we're talking about today. Such knowledge capture and dissemination would help us all to deal with climate adaptation and mitigation challenges. It would also suggest different modes and sources of financing, along with novel instruments for climate financing that are applicable to infrastructure projects, while also suggesting appropriate incentive frameworks and structures. As the world faces the climate crisis, we are also confronting various headwinds and crises, including the lingering effect of the pandemic and the new geopolitical crisis resulting in rising commodity prices across the globe. And of course, it's profoundly felt also in emerging and developing countries. It is within this context that mobilizing additional climate finance remains a top priority. Currently, as the global economy begins to slowly recover, rising demand for long-term infrastructure financing will increase, particularly to support the recovery, as well as for countries to meet their SDGs goals and aspirations. This is, however, faced by a very high public debt on the government sides. So now we are solving how to solve this dilemma, which is not so easy. More demand, but very, very limited fiscal space. The one way that we should put focus on is how to make sure that green investment would take a priority that will help countries also to achieve their development goals while also preserving the economies from the adverse effect of climate change. This requires availing adequate financing at good and sustainable terms from all stakeholders, and of course MDBs will be instrumental both as a key source of affordable financing, but also as a catalyst for mobilizing private capital at good terms. Also, we need a holistic approach that can address all aspects of climate change, covering financial, adaptation, loss and damage, beside mitigation. Turning to my country's experience, I would like to share a few highlights. Egypt invested heavily over the past few years in climate-smart infrastructure development and energy transition at large in an attempt to reduce carbon emissions. Our national renewable energy strategy strives to source around 42% of our total generated electricity from renewable sources by 2035. By the way, we are now at above 20%. So already we made a very big, remarkable achievement recently with a lot of support from everybody attending today, as well as others. And by the way, most 90% of this generated electricity are done by the private sector. This success story is well documented, by the way, in this very interesting publication, as well as with other very interesting also cases. But also, we are building on that. We're building a green hydrogen strategy that should be published very soon. It's almost done, and that is also in line with our also national energy framework for 2040. Why I'm mentioning that? Because new sustainable sources of energy are not just only needed for Egypt, but are needed also for a lot of other countries. And with countries like Egypt that is very rich in those natural resources, we can do a lot to export and to avail sustainable energy resources to neighboring countries. And this requires also a lot of investment to build the interconnections between regions. Now in Egypt we have already built-in interconnections with neighboring countries like Libya, like Sudan, as well as, of course, with Jordan, but also more are now being designed and even in the preparation phase with Saudi Arabia, as well as with a lot of other African countries, as well with Europe, Greece and Cyprus. This cross-border interconnection lines will help export clean and renewable energy to our neighboring countries and can help to solve this problem. Egypt is also working to enhance the role of the private sector across all economic sectors. One particular mechanism that we are focusing on, of course, is the PPP framework, but also other options are also being studied as well as explored. All these efforts require adequate project preparation and capacity building to ensure that high-quality projects are bankable and ready for execution. And here, MCDF role would be extremely valuable in providing such needed technical assistance and support to all countries, especially developing ones. Let me finally conclude by saying that I look forward to a very interactive and insightful panel today, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Vice Minister Kouchouk, for your information on the sustainable energy blueprint in Egypt. MCDF will continue to support Egyptian ambition to be the international energy hub and its energy transformation. So our next speaker is President Chen. President Chen is the AIIB's inaugural president and the chair of the board of directors. He has a rich experience across the private sector and the public sector and with multilateral development banks. He previously served as chair of China International Capital Corporation Limited, chair of the supervisory board of China Investment Corporation, and the vice president and then ranking vice president of the Asian Development Bank. He also worked for nearly 2 decades at the Ministry of Finance of China, where he reached the rank of vice minister. So President Chen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. Honorable Vice Minister Liao, Director Kouchouk, Vice President Manuela, Ferro, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to AIIB's headquarters for this discussion on climate-smart infrastructure. I would like to recognize the efforts of all the organizers today, which include the Chinese Ministry of Finance, the World Resources Institute, our bank staff, and the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance, MCDF, which took the lead on co-organizing this event today. In the present world, connectivity is more important than ever. Substantial investments in infrastructure that connect people and countries have rendered it possible for us to achieve unprecedented economic progress. At the same time, when the human society is faced with the greatest challenges on climate change on a scale unknown to the humans, We understand why it is so important to ensure that our connectivity investments are sustainable and climate smart is of immense importance. Both connectivity and climate lie at the core of our bank's mission. As a 21st century multilateral development bank, AIIB's mission critical is to finance infrastructure that is innovative, inclusive, and sustainable. Since 2016, our bank has financed 238 projects to the order of $45 billion in 36 members of this bank. More than 50% of these projects include climate adaptation and mitigation. And more than 15% promote cross-border connectivity. AIIB is already meeting its strategic goal that 50% or above of our annual financing comprised of climate financing by 2025. We achieved this by 2022. For cross-border connectivity, our goal is a minimum of 30% of annual approvals by 2030, towards which we are making solid progress. As AIIB's recently announced Climate Action Plan makes very clear, 79% of global GHG emissions are attributed to the infrastructure sector. But you cannot get rid of infrastructure. So infrastructure is important for our daily life. Our financing for infrastructure must not be done in the traditional way. So to increase our support for our members' decarbonization commitments, we have to make sure that our financing for infrastructure for tomorrow will be good for their transition to net zero. Our bank is looking to grow our financing for cross-border energy transmission projects, sustainable international maritime and overland transport corridors, as well as innovative digital infrastructure solutions. I would like to applaud today's launch of the publication on climate smart connectivity infrastructure, best practices and case studies. I expect that this best practice guide on climate smart connectivity infrastructure will be helpful, not just for our bank, but also for other multilateral development banks who are all looking to ensure that new infrastructure is and will remain sustainable and is fully climate resilient. Connectivity projects are often large and complex undertakings with long gestation period. For this reason, strong collaboration with our MDB peers is essential, especially on co-financing. We are very proud of our strong co-financing partnerships with the World Bank and Asian Development Bank, and we stand ready to work with our MDB peers to do more so that we can deliver better together for our clients. Our commitment to financing the infrastructure for tomorrow is unwavering. By integrating our global climate connectivity goals, together we can finance a more sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous tomorrow. Once again, I'd like to thank you and welcome to our bank, and I wish you all a stimulating discussion today and moving ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Jin. Under your strong leadership, the AIIB has committed to both climate actions and connectivity investment. We very much appreciate the strong support from AIIB to MCDF, and we look forward to a closer cooperation in the future. So our final speaker is Ms. Manuela Ferro, World Bank Vice President for East Asia and the Pacific. Appointed to this role in September 2021, Vice President Ferro manages World Bank relations with 26 countries and a portfolio of around $35 billion. She has over 3 decades of experience in development and held several leadership positions in the World Bank, including Vice President of Operations Policy and Country Services. She has also served in leadership roles in Latin America and the Caribbean and the Middle East and North Africa. Vice President, please.
Good afternoon, Vice Minister Kouchouk. Good to see you. President Chen, once again, thanks for the hospitality, and CEO Wang. It is a real pleasure to be back in Beijing and to partner once again with MCDF, this time for the launch of this report on climate-smart connectivity infrastructure. I know I am amongst long-standing friends and partners. The World Bank has a strong partnership with China spanning more than 4 decades, and we are looking forward to the next 4. Vice Minister Kouchouk, it's a pleasure to see you and acknowledge our wide-ranging program in Egypt, and it is a real pleasure to be back at AIIB in this beautiful headquarters that leaves me only a little bit jealous. AIIB has rapidly become the World Bank's largest co-financer globally, but also an institution that shares a lot of our values and indeed our policies. I, of course, want to thank MCDF for bringing us all together, not just for today's panel, but also for our membership in the coordinating committee, which includes all of the world's largest MDBs, including the World Bank and indeed AIIB. This collaborative approach is very much in the spirit of the latest statement of the heads of MDB after our annual meetings in Morocco last month, which emphasized the collective role we need to play in response to global challenges, and in particular, to boost joint action on climate. So this is very much in the same spirit. Now, climate change is indeed an existential threat to us all, which requires focus and collective action. And with the new vision and mission, we at the World Bank are doing our part. We are focusing on reducing poverty on a livable planet and incentivizing growth and development with a less carbon-intensive footprint. And that is really the challenge of our times, is to continue supporting development, but decoupling growth from carbon emissions. Now, the stakes are high, and let's take this region as an example. In East Asia and the Pacific, we've had an exceptional growth record that has lifted over 1 billion people out of poverty. There are not many regions in the world that can say that. But climate change is already setting back some of these gains. More than half of the global losses of natural disasters that are increasing in frequency and intensity from climate change are happening in this region. And we estimate that the impacts from climate change could exceed 10% of GDP by 2050 in economies such as the Philippines or Vietnam, if no action is taken. Now, the report that is being launched today shows that climate-smart connectivity will be central to making our economies more resilient if we internalize the externalities of climate change. I was very pleased to see that the World Bank's example is also included, and indeed, we at the World Bank are investing in climate-smart connectivity across sectors in the world, but in this region in particular, and I'll give you a few examples. In transport, China is already a leader in low-carbon mobility. I took the very impressive high-speed train from Beijing to Jinan this Friday. More remains to be done in this country, but especially more remains to be done on climate-smart mobility in this region. We need climate-resilient infrastructure, and we are supporting climate-smart infrastructure in Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. But we also need policy reforms, and I think Vice Minister Liao spoke about fiscal policy, pricing, regulatory changes that encourage a shift to low-carbon transport at the city, regional, and country levels. Now, the energy sector is another good example of a sector where climate-smart action is necessary, but also has a strong connectivity angle. This past Saturday, again, I visited one of China's solar wind farms that the World Bank helped finance a few years ago, and we discussed how the financial sector can help the private sector scale up renewables, which are expanding extremely fast here in China and have the potential to do that elsewhere in the region and in the world. Here, too, this region has a chance to lead, but connectivity and transmission remains a bottleneck. So there is potential to integrate transmission further, both within countries, but also across countries, generating this regional power grid that would diversify and potentially even lower costs of energy across the region. Digital services are not only an increasingly important source of low-carbon growth and employment, but can also make all of these sectors more efficient. And I want to close by highlighting a key aspect of climate-smart infrastructure and connectivity that can link all of these sectors and countries together. And that is an increasing focus also for us at the World Bank. And that is the development of transparent, credible, and efficient carbon markets. Carbon markets can connect industries and countries, and setting a price for emissions that effectively enables trade-offs and reward lower carbon intensity will be both efficient, but it will also help protect the climate. China has introduced the world's largest emission trading scheme in the power sector in 2021. It offers many lessons, but also the potential to improve and expand. And across the world, less than a quarter of global emissions are covered by carbon taxes and emissions trading, but I have to say there is potential to do better in carbon markets and credible carbon credits. Now, connecting industries and countries through carbon markets will help incentivize more climate action and provide a debt-free source of climate finance. In conclusion, let me just say that we are investing a lot of our own resources for climate action. In fiscal year 2023, as a group, we committed a record $38.6 billion in climate finance, much of it in transport, energy, and digital transformation. And this is an increase of about 22% over the previous fiscal year, and it accounts for 41% of total financing. Of course, our financing also includes health, education, social protection, and those tend to have lower climate co-benefits. Now, I hope that COP28, which takes place in 2 weeks, will provide renewed impetus to our collected effort. And this panel today is another valuable opportunity to think about pragmatic, practical ways to advance climate action in infrastructure. I do wish you a very productive discussion today. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Vice President Ferro. As you pointed out, the World Bank is the largest multilateral funder for climate investment, but also it is the critical knowledge provider on the climate actions. We really appreciate the leadership of the World Bank, and we look forward to the closer cooperation with it in the future. So before we conclude the opening session, let's give a applause to all of our speakers for their remarks. Thank you very much. So now I would like to hand over to my colleague, Mr. John Spencer, for moderation in the next sessions, please.
Great, thank you very much, CEO Wang. And to our distinguished speakers. So having heard some important high-level messages from our valued partners, we now want to focus on the technical issues around how to, in practice, finance and implement climate-smart connectivity infrastructure. And we want to base the discussion around our report, and I was going to do some sort of marketing around it, but all our opening speakers have very graciously spoken about it and done my job for me, so thank you very much for that. And just to say, all of you have a copy of it in your bags that you were given when you arrived, so if you want to find out more about it, please have a look. For then an introduction to its key messages, I'm now delighted to say we're going to be playing a video for you from Mr. Ijjasz, who's Senior Advisor to the MCDF CEO and is the lead author of it. So please, can we start the video? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ijjasz, Senior Advisor to the CEO of MCDF and Project Director for the publication being launched today on climate smart connectivity infrastructure, financing innovations, and best practices. I am sorry I cannot be present with you today at this important event. In these short remarks, I want to describe the main messages of this publication. But first, let me thank the many partners engaged, in particular the Ministries of Finance of Egypt and China, AIIB, the Islamic Development Bank, the V20, the World Bank, and WRI, but also the many international financial institutions, UN organizations, MCDF partner countries, think tanks, and universities that brought the best knowledge and experience on climate smart connectivity infrastructure to the workshop series that served as the basis for this report. The objective of the workshop series and the publication was to explore the role connectivity infrastructure can have in climate action at the national, regional, and global levels. The discussion covered both climate mitigation, the reduction of greenhouse gases emitted by connectivity infrastructure and the services they provide, and climate adaptation, the need for connectivity infrastructure to be designed, operated, and maintained to make it more resilient to the climate shocks and disasters of today and those of tomorrow that will be more intense and frequent due to a rapidly changing climate. Connectivity infrastructure is critical for climate mitigation because it is both part of the problem of carbon emissions as well as part of the solution. It is part of the problem because sectors reliant on connectivity infrastructure, such as energy and transport, presently account for over 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This requires large shifts in energy and transport technology. Achieving the world's climate goals requires decisive action in road transport. During the workshops, WRI showed that of the 160 countries that have submitted NDCs, only 42 countries have greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for the transport sector. The World Bank discussed that targeting specific segments of the electric vehicles market is needed in the sustainable transport strategy of developing countries. In many of these countries, electric 2- and 3-wheelers and buses should be the focus. In China, for example, electronic toll lanes, intelligent signal controls, and carpooling have helped the transport sector make substantial progress in climate action. Connectivity energy infrastructure is also part of the solution in how countries can shift to zero carbon economies. For example, with better cross-border energy transmission infrastructure, consumers have access to regions that have high renewable energy potential. Countries can reduce the carbon emissions of their energy by accessing those renewable resources. However, a common challenge today in renewable energy worldwide is the lagging energy transmission infrastructure capacity. The opportunities to engage private sector financing in connectivity energy infrastructure are discussed in the report. In addition, smart grids will be a critical component of climate action in the energy sector. Let me now talk about climate adaptation. The workshops and the publication also discuss the critical importance of incorporating the current and projected impacts of climate change in the design and retrofit of connectivity infrastructure. As the useful life of connectivity infrastructure assets is expected to last for decades, climate change shocks such as floods, sea level rise, and storm surges are expected to increase in frequency and severity. Adaptation and resilience must be part of infrastructure project designs. Adaptation and resilience make economic sense. For example, natural disasters cost $8 billion in annual damages to roads and railways in low and middle-income countries. However, the most important cost comes from the disruption to firms' operations and sales caused by interruption after climate disasters on roads. This amounts in developing countries to about 107 billion US dollars per year to their economies. The investments to strengthen resilience are not very expensive. Estimates by the government of Fiji, for example, show that an additional 4% of investment in infrastructure to strengthen the resilience can lead to as much as 4 times more in benefits. Practical project examples from Brazil to Africa, Bangladesh, and Vietnam that illustrate how to deal with climate risks, present and future, in connectivity infrastructure projects are included in the report. I want to conclude with 7 key lessons highlighted in the report. First, getting the basics right is integral to taking action on climate. Enforcing regulations, ensuring high maintenance standards, and adequate funding are critical for infrastructure projects to withstand climate change impacts. Maintenance planning and addressing existing infrastructure vulnerabilities improve resilience and provide a fourfold return on investments. Second, it is crucial to design connectivity infrastructure for an uncertain future. At this stage, we do not know at what level of warming the world will end up, so engineers will need to design infrastructure to withstand a range of possible future scenarios. The new infrastructure needs to be flexible, adaptable, and resilient in the face of uncertain climate impacts. Third, innovative financial models and public-private partnerships, exemplified by green bonds like those described in the report and presented by Egypt, EBRD, and AIIB, are fundamental for climate action in connectivity infrastructure. Integration of climate risks and environmental protections into PPP contracts promotes successful outcomes. Fourth, climate action is impossible without coordination across agencies and sectors. Integration of climate objectives into medium-term national development plans fosters private sector involvement. Regional cooperation and incentivized public-private collaboration further promote equitable resource access and identify infrastructure needs. Fifth, data and science are more important than ever. Access to data and modeling improves decision-making for infrastructure projects. Master planning and better climate risk assessments are needed to make informed choices that enhance resilience of connectivity infrastructure. Sixth, investing in climate-smart infrastructure makes good business sense. I have already mentioned how investing in resilience yields a significant return on investments, but we also heard powerful examples of how shifting to cleaner technology also brings many additional benefits. For instance, shifting to electric vehicles not only reduces carbon emissions, but also pollution and dependence on fuel imports. Lastly, success in climate action in infrastructure cannot be achieved without the private sector. Leveraging private sector finance can reduce costs and speed up the delivery of projects. This can be done through private-public partnerships, changing procurement processes, and developing innovative financial instruments. In conclusion, connectivity infrastructure is critical to enable countries to realize their commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement and achieve their net zero targets. This infrastructure will have a very long lifespan. Decisions taken today will have an impact for decades to come. We hope this publication can help advance the important role of connectivity infrastructure in climate action. I wish you a fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Eddie. And so let's now turn to our panel discussion to unpack the issues that have been raised, and in particular to look into these different lessons that were identified in the report and how can we practically implement them. So to help us with this, I'm delighted we have an expert set of speakers for our panel. And so grateful if they can now take their seats on the stage, starting with Dr. Fang Li, Country Director for the World Resources Institute in China. Fang Li, would you like to take your seat in the middle, please? Thank you. And then Dr. Supee Teravaninthorn, Special Advisor to the Vice President of Investment Operation Region 2 of AIIB. And Dr. Chen, Director of Transport at the Asian Development Bank. And finally, Mr. Joonkyung Seong, Program Leader for Infrastructure and Senior Energy Specialist at the World Bank. Great. So what we'll do is, first of all, hear from each of the panelists on what their organizations are doing to promote climate-smart connectivity infrastructure. And then we'll ask them for their specific advice on the lessons we've identified. So Dr. Fang, we're delighted to have you as our climate and environment sort of specialist on the panel, and very grateful also for WRI's support to this event. So prior to becoming the country director of WRI China, Dr. Fang worked for many years in senior roles in the Chinese Ministry of Environment and Ecology, and also for the China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development, CCICD, which is one of China's leading, I think, think tanks on the environment. So I think in addition to her climate expertise, she also brings a lot of expertise on the Chinese context. So Dr. Fang, very grateful if you could start off then by introducing WRI's work in this area, and particularly anything innovative that you think WRI is doing that others aren't. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad and congratulations on publishing the new report. After struggling for 3 decades, the world really needs that best practice, especially from the perspective of the banks. And I'm coming from the World Resources Institute, a 40 years organization, starting from think tank and trying to build a bridge from scientific recognition to political consensus. And after political consensus, we are trying to provide the tools and data for scientific decision. So for example, we host track 2 dialogue before or behind the formal political talks. And we also, the famous GHG protocol, we mentioned scope 1, 2, 3, that WI developed that from 1998. Now we are going to update it. So that is a good chance for banks join us to update the standards. In terms of today's topic, that's the smart, climate smart connectivities infrastructure. And Ed mentioned during his video, mentioned about NDC, National Determined Contributions, that there's no very detailed target from the sector of the transportation. And 2 decades ago, I'm happy to see that also quote in our published report, WI starting trying to provide the tool. And since NDC is just a target, it's a place where we need to go, but how can we go there? What are the tools? What is the transportation? And WI provided the roadmap from where we are the current place to the target place. So it is called the ASI, Avoid, Shift, and Improved. Avoid is trying to using better plan to avoid the unnecessary emission. So that is a beforehand. That is a shorten the distance and also reduce the frequency of the travel. And there's one of very famous tools, it's called TOD, transportation-oriented development. That is the idea that giving the public investment in transportation. Normally, it's a not very profit program, but with the developing real estate around the transportation, that they internalize the externality into the same program. So that is make the transportation is more profitable, more bankable. And second is a shift. That is improve the public transportation and also comfort the non-motorized traffic. So that is make the people feel easy to using bicycle and also to walk in the short distance. And also we need to shift from the kind of the car to the public transportation, shift the goods from the freight, the road to the railway or by water. And third part, we also have the tools that is called BRT, Bus Rapid Transition. So WI is a low profile, always put our flags down. We have more than 40 these kind of the tools, and also it's playing very well in the world. And finally, it's improve. So we are trying to improve the technology, renewable vehicles, and also energy efficiency. So I pause here and looking forward to maybe next seminar could be on more factors other than climate. Since AIIB, MCDF collaborate with the WRI, we're launching PBF, Partnership on Biodiversity and Finance. So besides the climate, we have nature also.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Fang. So, I mean, clearly WRI being a real pioneer on the data from an early stage, and I think this avoid, shift, improve framework for kind of climate smart transport is a very powerful, one to make sure we're taking a comprehensive approach. Thank you very much. So let me now turn to Dr. Teravaninthorn. So she's had a very distinguished career working on infrastructure for MDBs in, I think, most regions of the world. So for the past 7 years, she's been in various senior roles in AIIB on building its investment operations and is currently leading on its operations in Africa and Latin America. And prior to AIIB, she worked for the World Bank. So Dr. Teravaninthorn, grateful if we can put the same question to you about what AIIB is doing in this space. And I'm just aware we're running a bit short of time, so just grateful if all our panelists on this first round, we can try and be, concise to that and maximum time to get into the lessons later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think that AIIB don't need to say much about it. AIIB already announced to be climate, to be an institution that is Paris aligned, starting from July 1st of this year, 2023. But before then, our investment is always, we are very conscious, very concerned, and very conscious to make sure that we are into the area that is climate positive. I think I just want to briefly say, you talk about innovation. We do, and I think actually in your lesson 3, when Ed talked about that in lesson 3, and it struck me, and I think it is very relevant to talk about it from AIIB point of view, is innovative financing model. And yes, we do innovative financing model. We do green bonds. Everybody do green bonds also, right? But this is green bond is one way of saying that it's giving a message that we want to do something that is green. And in our green bond, we have done already in region 2, $550 million worth of green bonds. We also do project that is still in the classical way of doing project, and that is very climate related. For example, we have done a project in Turkey that we do it in a way that we are wholesale banker and we lend it, it's a line of credit, lend it to a commercial bank the $200 million of lending to commercial bank, they will go into, but with a condition that they can on-lend this $200 million to a project that is related to renewable energy. So in a way, you can say direct or indirect way of contributing to climate dimension and we can go down, not only lend to the big guys in the room, but we can lend on the small guys in the room. And actually the small guys in the room are the one that is very important to make this climate smart happen. And so that the example that I can give. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I think this example on lending for green infrastructure, I know there's a number of Chinese banks in the room today, and I think it would be of interest for them. And I know actually AIIB's done it on lending for China Exim Bank with MCDF support on this as well. So I think this is a model that we're also being applied well in China and could be further expanded. Thank you, Doctor. So let's turn now to Dr. Chen. So thank you very much for joining us as our transport expert today. So prior to his current role heading up ADB's work on transport, Dr. Chen's worked for ADB for 16 years, both as a transport specialist, but also most recently as country director for Sri Lanka for them. And has also authored 16 publications, and I was having a look and I see there's one of them you've done at least one on how to climate-proof roads. So you're very experienced on this exact topic. So yeah, grateful if you can say then what ADB is doing to promote climate-smart transport, and particularly what you're proud of and what you think is innovative. Thank you.
Thank you, Strahan. Thank you for the good study about my publications. So thanks for having me here. I'm very glad to join colleagues from WRI, AIIB, and World Bank and other organizations in this discussion. So probably I just want to share a few things about what ADB is doing, try to promote this climate-smart connectivity infrastructure. You mentioned the publication I did was actually 15 years back. It's a climate-proofing the road infrastructure in East Timor. But that's a terminology we used 15 years ago, how to climate-proof infrastructure. Later, we used the word climate adaptation, and recently we call it climate resilience. And today we call it climate smart. I think this is a very good evolvement of the terminology, and to me it shows actually the ecosystem of a climate smart connectivity ecosystem is required, and infrastructure is one important part of it. So in ADB, what we did is, if I may summarize, it's actually we set our ambition high. We re-equip ourselves, and we reorganize, re-engineer ourselves. So when we decided to actually set a target in our strategy 2030, that's back in 2018, ADB set a target of climate finance of 80 million from 2018 to 2030. So that was a target that we considered very high back then. But after a few years, we feel we can even do even better. So last year, President Asagawa of ADB set an even higher ambition. We want to increase this target to an ambition of 100 billion by 2030. So that will require a lot of work. But how to achieve that? We did a few things. First, we try to equip ourselves. We try to set several new finance modalities. So recently this year, in May, we set up an IFCAP, Innovative Finance Facility for Asia and the Pacific. So this is quite an interesting mechanism. It is actually to use guarantee from ADB member countries, try to guarantee part of ADB's portfolio so that we can lend more resource to our developing member countries. We hope through this facility, every $1 of guarantee can mobilize $5 of additional finance to the developing member countries. And the target initially was set at 3 billion. Eventually, we hope this facility can mobilize 15 billion to the region. Another new equipment or new instrument I want to mention is actually the ETM. So it's not transport sector, but it's also a very innovative thing. It's about energy transition mechanism. We set up this mechanism so that we can encourage several countries with a coal power plant to advance the retirement plan. Currently, the team is discussing with Indonesia, with Philippines, how to make several transactions happen. If this can happen, this can become quite a good model for other countries to replicate. But those are just the platform. We also recognize ADB need to re-engineer itself. The past business model may work in the past, but moving forward, to achieve the target, to achieve the ambition of 100 billion, we needed to adopt a new business model. So I took this position on June 30, 2023. So this is just the 5th month. The way we did is we reorganized the ADB. We put all the sector teams together into one office so that we can have all the talent in the sector to tackle the climate change challenge. So in the transport sector, in the past, we have 5 regional teams, but now we combined the regional teams, we created 3 practice teams. One practice team will focus on the railway and logistics. Another one will focus on smart mobility. And the third one is about the emerging area. So this reflects our understanding about the future needs for the climate smart infrastructure. Railway logistics can help address the climate change challenge. Smart mobility is another solution to help address the travel demands, both the vehicle and also the passenger transport and freight transport. And finally, the reason we set up this emerging area is because we admit we don't know everything about climate change yet. We need to follow the trend. We need to monitor how these things will happen, so that we want to keep a team to monitor the future direction. Let me pause here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah, really interesting. Clearly, ADB, you're really trying to innovate with your new financial mechanisms, but then we've got this lesson, which we'll come on to more later, on coordination is key, where we'll be talking about the need to get government ministries coordinating with each other. But obviously, you've taken that to heart, and you're saying, okay, we need to get better at organising within ADB. So, because if you want to help coordinate governments, you need to be organised within yourself. So that's very interesting, and I hope we can come back to that. Okay, so let's go on to Mr. Seong. So great to have you as our energy specialist today. So Mr. Seong is currently managing the World Bank's energy and transport programs in China and Mongolia, and also leading on energy transition for the East Asia and Pacific region. And he's 15 years experience on sustainable energy and finance across both the private sector and multilateral institutions. So again, Mr. Seong, what's the World Bank doing, and what are you particularly proud of in this space? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, let me congratulate MCDF and all our partners for launching this report. I think this is very timely and important and excellent. And I'm pleased to be part of this important discussion. When we talk about connectivity infrastructure, people tend to talk about resilience, adaptation angle of infrastructure. But this report actually has laid out, very well framed it, that it is important for adaptation as well as a mitigation. And that's actually, from the energy sector perspective, we want to emphasize, for a while. And I think this report has done a great job in framing it in a right way. Since my background is from energy sector, let me share with you what the World Bank is doing in the energy sector about connectivity infrastructure. So I would say that there are large 3 areas that we are doing in this connectivity infrastructure, particularly in the energy sector. The one is a transmission, distribution grid network, as well as the cross-border regional interconnection, which also the Eddie mentioned and the report also mentioning. And then second is energy access and electrification, which is also the part of the connectivity issue and has an important contribution to both mitigation and adaptation. And then the lastly, energy infrastructure resilience. So let me talk about these 3 points briefly. So on the transmission, distribution, and cross-border interconnection, as we all learned over the past decade, we have done a great success in reducing cost of renewable energy and scaling up the capacity of solar PV and wind, and then now energy storage. And assuming that once you build it with the private sector, with the government, with the public sector, it will be connected automatically to the system. And now we are learning that this is not the case. So many countries are actually facing bottlenecks in transmission and distribution in the grid system to integrate those renewable energy and evacuate this clean electricity to where we need. It's in this region, in East and Pacific region, we see these challenges across the countries. I mean, from China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Laos, PDR, Cambodia, Mongolia, just to name a few. I mean, most of the countries are facing similar situation. I mean, the magnitude of challenge might be different, but they are facing similar issues on that. And we are having engagement with all of these countries to support them to address the bottlenecks and advance the progress in scaling up the transmission and distribution capacity. And also, when you talk about transmission capacity, it's not about the physical, the lines to be there. With the renewable energy, we need more flexible grid to incorporate these. So the investment in connectivity infrastructure will include the storage and flexible measures, and also flexible arrangement of electricity trade between two parties. And then comes to cross-border regional interconnection. I think increasingly we are also aware of this importance of this investment. And I mean, the World Bank has done many support, especially in Africa, where we see like a large regional power pool, East African power pool, West African power pool, is finally come and running. In this region, we have been talking about ASEAN grid for a while, but I mean, progress has been, I would say, limited. So there are a lot more potential to be harnessed, especially if you look at the Lao PDR and Myanmar, where we have lots of hydro potential, and especially in Lao PDR. I mean, they have in 2021, they have 11 terawatt hour of generation surplus from the hydropower plants, which is as big as Cambodia's total electricity consumption in a year. So it's a huge amount of electricity is becoming surplus, not being utilized. I mean, they are exporting only less than 2 terawatt hour out of 11 terawatt hour to neighboring countries. So there are a lot of things that we can do actually to improve connectivity, interconnection between Laos and other neighboring countries, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and then use that electricity, clean electricity from Lao PDR's hydro, and then support energy transition in other countries. Same for Myanmar. Unfortunately, the situation doesn't allow us to engage further there, but they have a lot of hydro potential which can be developed and help in energy transition in the region at the regional level. And then, I mean, obviously this interconnection is not easy. It's not just building lines and then electricity will be traded. There will be political consensus needed among the parties, and then technical challenges need to be addressed in grid codes harmonization, and as well as a commercial framework to make sure that both countries are benefiting from this interconnection arrangement. So there needs to be a lot of coordination and support required to these part countries, and that's where I think the international development partners can play a role to facilitate that. I mean, access and resilience, I think, I mean, I'll be brief on that. Access, I mean, we can replace diesel by providing electrification and then support mitigation, as well as that will help strengthen resilience and adaptation for those communities that are remote to be connected. Resilience, I mean, access, we are active across the country, across the world. Resilience, specifically, let me introduce our focus on the Pacific region with the Pacific Island countries. We're working with them to strengthen the resilience of the infrastructure in the energy sector. That includes expansion of renewable energy and access. For the same reason with the access, it actually helps them to reduce the dependency on import diesel, so that actually they can strengthen their resilience when the natural disaster hit and they have a difficulty in ship these diesels to these countries. Also, we're working on strengthening the physical infrastructure, the reinforcement, and then having redundancy in the system, and also putting it underground, as well as an early warning system to be prepared for that, as well as innovative financing schemes, because each of the countries is too small to be prepared for these climate hazards. So we are pulling them together at the regional level and provide financial support so that they can support each other when it comes to the disaster, and so that they can improve their resilience over time. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Clearly, a lot of rich things the World Bank's doing, and I mean, particularly good for us to hear about, or not good, but I mean, interesting about the sort of transmission as a key bottleneck, right? There's a big focus on generation of renewables, but they're not actually, moving it where it needs to be, and particularly the opportunities for the cross-border transmission, which this is at the heart of what MCDF is trying to do, and so very keen to work with you and other partners on how to really progress these issues. Thank you very much. So let's now move on to the sort of round two, which is really trying to dig into some of the lessons. So if we could just have the lessons up on the screen for us, and already I think a lot of these have been coming out in what panelists have been saying. Now, given that we're running short of time, although I think I'd said to the panelists to sort of think about talking about around two lessons, I think I'm going to have to push you just to focus on one each. And I think, Dr. Fang, you could perhaps focus on the coordination is key point, because I think this has already kind of come up earlier, and I know with your experience in the Chinese Ministry of Environment, you'll be very used to how to support ministerial coordination. So, and just to say, this kind of came up really from like we had about 40 different presentations and case studies in the workshop series that this publication is based on, and most of the speakers were saying that this issue requires getting ministries of climate and finance and environment together with ministries of energy and transport in new ways of working together. So keen to hear your thoughts on how to make this a reality. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. 7 lessons are all important and matters. WRI working in more than 200 cities. They are all related to the connection. And according to our experiences, coordination is really key issues for that, since that the climate change is just adding a new element to the economic systems. So it's really needed from the different sectors collaboration. Giving you an example that if we want to shifting the goods from freight on the road to the railway station, to railway and by water, we not only need to collaborate with the port, the government port, environment, energy sector, transportation, and also data, how provided data make the system really efficiency, not need to let the goods waiting in the port for longer time and without the efficiency. And beside of those, and also for electricity vehicles, for example, EV, it's also need to work closely with the grid, since the recharging need very different requirement from the supply of the electricity. But beside of those technology issues, the government collaboration and coordination are quite important. The purpose for that, I'm going to follow President Jing's for AIIB, green, clean, and lean. But the coordination from among the government, the purpose for that is 4B. Better behavior get better benefit. Since climate is an externalities element, but only if when we put it into the system of the economic, it can make the profit. Then the banks are not the philanthropy, right? The investment need to get the return. So according to the previous practice, that is the successful practice is working with the different government and make the system, the externality into the system. We work in Bogota, we work in San Diego, working with the local EPA, transportation ministry, and also the grid, the national grid, and using the financial instrument to invest in e-bus. Then at the same time, we get mutual benefit from the people's health, pollution control, better transportation, and reduce emission of the greenhouse gas. So that is a purpose for coordination among the government, and also technology coordination also important. And I also want to highlight another lesson. It's data, lesson 5. And WRI has many kind of the data platform. Most interesting tools is, we call it a Energy Access Explorer. It's open source and online, and it's a visual data platform to show you where is economic activity area without the electricity. for example, in Africa. So the data can show you where we can go. And at the same time, another famous data platform called Global Forest Watch, we can use the data of the forest to help the wildfire combat, but most interestingly, we help the NDB, New Development Bank, when they want to build the new road. We tell them where is a biodiversity conservative area. So the data can tell us where we should not go. And third, the data also can help draw the decision. WI developed the data on adaptation, the risk. We have the risk map. We cooperate with the New York government, municipal government, and show the different color. Where is the pink, where is the red, where is the orange, so the investor can get the very good information. And also the insurance also comes with a different rate. And finally, the data also can give the digitalization using our GHG protocol can measure the emission. No measure, no management. So nowadays, the digitalization technology with the development of the digital technology, and think that is lower down the cost of the management dramatically. So I think that is a 4D, decarbonization, digitalization, and without and deforestation are driven force. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Clearly, WRI, you can see, it developed a lot of useful tools, practical tools to help use data for decision making. And so I think we've got some of them mentioned in the report. I know one of them where we had a presentation on in the workshop series. But if anyone wants to know more about those tools, please come and speak to Dr. Fang afterwards, and we look forward to working with you on those. Okay, so let's go on to AIIB. Dr. Teravaninthorn, yeah, please, which is the lesson you're most interested to talk about? Thank you.
Well, I have to say that all 7 lessons had some interrelationship with each other. So it is very difficult to say you do only one. And I want to prove that also, that it is interrelationship. I can talk about lesson 3, I can talk about lesson 6, I can talk about lesson 7, maybe I will choose to do lesson 7. But I want to say that this is the domain that you have to be holistic. You are not talking about one sector and then solve all the problem. For example, and I take a real life example. We do an EV bus project in Liaoning. Is it a transport project or is it an energy project? We do a railway electrification project in Uzbekistan. Is this a transport project or is this an energy project? So you have to think holistically. You cannot really focus on your sector. So that's one. Now, you talk about private sector mobilization. We want to mobilize private sector. Of course, especially AIIB talk about 50-50. We want to move to 50-50 private and public. So we have to mobilize private sector. And private sector, how they make a decision to invest or not to invest. They read the market signal. No, not only where again, market signal is important for them to make a decision. But not only market signal that they read government signal. And since we have many government people in here in this room, I want to emphasize that I cannot emphasize enough. MDB, be it MDB, be it private sector, be it whoever, the one who they need to reset, and finally, the one who pushed the button is the government. MCDF, maybe I'm a little bit provoking here. MCDF can produce, or World Bank, AIIB, can produce marvelous report. But if that marvelous report doesn't turn the government to push the button, thing will not move. The machine will not move because the private sector read the market signal and read the government signal. Market signal is right, but the government signal is not right. They will have reservation in putting money. And now that we are sitting in China, because we sit in China, I want to take Chinese example. Even though I can talk about Africa too, but let me take Chinese example. And I take the EV example of China. I'm amazed to see the population of electric vehicle came on board very fast in the past 3 years. And I try to ask why. And in this case, you have private sector who produce the EV to sell to us. You also have the charging station, who many countries is also private sector to sell the charger and charging station. In case of China, maybe it's SOE. Now, EV and charging station are chicken and egg. Chicken and egg in the sense that if I'm an EV producer, I won't sell too many EV if I don't have a everywhere charging station. If the person who buy EV from me go to Tianjin and then cannot come back because there is no charging station, what do I do? So the EV producer want the charging station to increase the charging station. But the charging station will not invest in charging station if you don't have EV population to buy my charge, right? So this is a chicken and egg, and who is going to, everybody look at each other, you invest first or I invest first. In case of China, after I see all this, I was amazed to see the vehicle population of EV that is increased very rapidly during the COVID years, actually. And then I tried to do a little bit more asking around this, and I can understand that actually the Chinese government is the one who push a button, is the one who really take the subsidy, is the one who tell the China state grid, the one who have to invest. This is a state-owned enterprise, and therefore maybe it's easier to do than in other countries like Thailand or somewhere. But it is an example, a very clear example to me, that private sector alone is not going to make it. You have to have the government sector who have a vision, the vision and set the target, and then maybe you have the deep pocket to also subsidize to make an early start. So I understand that China Grid is the one who get a signal from the government that you invest massively on the charging station, and that will ignite the EV. So I want to say maybe I have lesson 8 here to say that. Yes, private sector mobilization is important, and of course as an MDB we try to do the maximum we can because we make money out of NSBF loan than SBF loan, to be honest, right? So we want the private sector to really come on board more. But government signal, government decision, government vision, and government promotion and all those must be also in the equation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Very sort of inspiring words from you on that. So we know it's very easy to see private sector sort of finance as a magic bullet, but actually it's quite hard to make it work well. And you say it needs government, a strong government role. And actually, just to kind of mention that in the report, in every chapter, we have a section at the end titled "Harnessing Private Finance" to try and give advice on how governments can actually harness it, because they need the capacity and need the support. So, thank you for that. And I guess that also, makes the case for MCDF. We have funding for capacity building that can help with that as well. Great. So then, Dr. Chen. I think we'd spoken before, and I'm very keen to hear from you, to be honest, on the lesson on getting the basics right. If that's okay. I mean, maybe other things you might want to, or you want to speak on something else. I think that's also my favorite one. Is that okay? And just to give you the background on this, basically, when we did the workshop on climate smart roads and railways, it was mentioned that for climate resilience, the key thing is to actually get the roads built according to the right regulations and then maintained properly. Because drains, for instance, are a key way to deal with flooding, but if they're not regularly cleaned out, they're useless. So it really struck us that actually just doing the basic things of maintaining infrastructure well, can ensure climate resilience. But that's very hard, how to make sure infrastructure is maintained. So grateful for your thoughts on this. Thank you. Thank
you, Strahan. First, allow me to echo my fellow panelists. All the 7 lessons are important. When I was reading this book, I was wondering why you choose 7 lessons only. Was this inspired by the popular book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? But I'm sure if we can take all the 7 lessons seriously, we can make a lot of good success in the climate change in the fight against the climate change. So yes, getting basic right. I think getting basic right, you just mentioned about the maintenance planning, road maintenance. I think one thing we should probably realize here, maintenance is about climate change adaptation. Maintenance is also about climate change mitigation. The reason I see this is when you have a road built, if you cannot maintain it, the road cannot be used by the user. The service, the freight cannot reach the end user. Then the climate change adaptation target cannot be achieved. You have to make sure regular maintenance so that the road can continue to be open. During the pandemic, we actually did some quick study about the nightlight in the rural area in several countries. We found for those countries, those areas with good rural connectivity, they were able to receive the vaccine, receive all this kind of service faster than other regions. I think same applies for the climate change. When you have a climate disaster, you need a basic connectivity to ensure the community is resilient. They are adapted to the new situation of climate change. But make basic things right is also about climate change mitigation. Many probably didn't realize when you have a smoother road, when you do maintenance well, that will reduce emission from the vehicles on the road. When the vehicles can travel in a relatively reasonable speed, essentially they don't have to brake, they don't have to stop, actually the emission will also be reduced. But ultimately, having the basic things right, that's a starting point for the next 6 lessons. If you cannot have the basic things right, all the next 6 lessons are based on nowhere. So I really like the 7 lessons because you have the first is having basic things right. Then you have 3 lessons, number 2, number 4, and number 5 about the actions related to design, to coordination, to decision making. You also have 3 lessons about finance regarding innovative finance, the business case, and private sector finance. I think this is a very well balanced 7 lessons. But if I may, actually, I also want to highlight one initiative. It's a joint initiative supported by ADB and AIIB. It's called Asia Transport Outlook. Probably just add to the data site you just mentioned earlier. So this is a joint initiative. We try to actually collect the data in the transport sector to actually show the trend, to analyze the trend against the progress towards SDG, towards the climate change target. If you are interested, you can check the website of this Asian Transport Outlook. Just 2 weeks back, they published a new report, which has a very interesting finding, and I found it probably relevant to today's event. It says, until very recently, the expectation or the estimate of the emission from transport sector in Asia, if we follow the business as usual, the BAU case, probably by 2050, it will reach 7 gigaton. But 2015 really turned this around. So based on the latest trend, the business as usual scenario will only bring the emission of Asia's transport sector to 4 gigaton. So it's a reduction of 3 gigaton already. So that gives us a very clear message. We are doing the right thing in this region. It's not yet enough. And how to do there, how to get there, I think we need to think about the 7 lessons. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for your, it's support to the way the lessons have turned out, and although we may need to add one based on Dr. Teravaninthorn's recommendation. So, Mr. Seong, as our energy expert, then which lesson are you most interested to talk on? And please just keep it to 1, given that we're now running into our reception time. Thank you.
Sure. But I can be efficient. I agree with all of the fellows panelists that they are all related. So it's not like 1 or 2 you can separate out. I see like lesson 3, innovative financial models. Lesson 6, investing in climate smart infrastructure makes good business sense. And lesson 7, private sector finance should be leveraged. So let me group them all together and suggest one case. So let me continue my pitch on transmission bottleneck that we talked about. So the need is huge out there, But the challenge here is that this is a traditionally private sector driven area, building transmission lines, distribution lines. So the utilities are supposed to do this. And what we see is that, I mean, in this region, in most countries, utilities are state-owned, vertically integrated, all the way from generation to distribution. And they are all suffering from the cost recovery and then financial sustainability. I mean, their electricity cost is not enough to cover the cost. So they suffer losses, or they have very, very marginal profit, which is insufficient to do the additional capital expenditure to continue to build these transmission lines. So that's where, as this report highlighted it in the chapter, the private sector participation in transmission development is actually an important area that we need to look into further. I mean, we have been talking about generation side a lot, and we see a lot of progress across the world. But in transmission, distribution, and then energy storage, this is we have a limited success here, and we need to see more innovation happening. So in this area, I mean, supporting these utilities to actually improve their cost recovery and financial sustainability is one. So actually the World Bank is working with many of these countries, including Vietnam, Indonesia, where the utilities are suffering from losses, try to improve their financial situation, and then try to tackle the sector reform to improve the fundamentals of the sector. At the same time, so the public-private partnership modality in transmission development can be explored. I mean, we see some happening in the region. For example, in Vietnam, I think in 2020, they did the first privately built transmission line, like 17-kilometer, 500 kV line by the private sector, which was a big success after the long time of discussion and the actually changing legislation in the PPP law in the country. And the Philippines is another example, actually, where the transmission has been given as a concessionaire for 50-year period for private sector company. So they signed into this concessionaire agreement in 2009. So they have been operating quite a while, and it's a private sector is basically maintaining and then operating and then expanding the asset there. But I mean, if you look at the Philippines, so okay, this is now we have a private sector participation. So is it all going well? Unfortunately, that's not the case. So we still see the bottlenecks in transmission. So for example, I think in 2022 they have almost 100 renewable energy generation project approved by the government, but they haven't received the approval from the transmission company to go ahead and build it because they cannot actually evacuate electricity from them. So many of them are actually stagnated and cannot proceed with the development. So I mean, even with the private sector, having private sector there and having private sector financing is not the end of the solution for this challenge. And there, I mean, we are seeing that there is a great role that we can play together as an advisor and development partner with the governments. So, I mean, legal framework, the policy and regulatory environment, as well as electricity market reform, to give open access, to create a wholesale market, and to get the price right, is actually the precondition to bring in private sector, because we need to be able to provide a return on their investment, and that compensation mechanism has to be in place in the electricity market. And we are supporting many countries to advance toward that area. Obviously, it's not an easy thing, but we are working together to do that, and we are working with the several countries to explore like a pilot PPP mechanism to develop transmission lines with the private sector. That's what we're doing. And also, I mean, the coordination is very, very important. So the government has the right signal from their transmission plan, long-term transmission plan, and the coordination with the private sector and public sector to develop the lines where it's really needed and ahead of the generation, so that you can scale up renewable energy electricity without constraints in the transmission side. And probably the last point that I want to talk about is the value of climate finance in transmission development, which has not been well recognized yet. So we see lots of climate finance coming to generation side. Okay, you reduce emission reduction, so we can get some benefit from either from concessional climate finance or carbon market as a resource-based things. We don't see much in the transmission lines, but now we see, I mean, it is equally important to develop transmission network as important as a generation asset side. So I think we need to explore how we can innovate our carbon market and climate finance mechanism and to provide some financial support to this area so that the network can catch up with the development pace in generation side. So that's something we can explore together. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So really, I mean, really interesting to hear, about the potential, but also the constraints on transmission. And say we're very keen to work with World Bank and others on this. So look, I think that's a great discussion. Thank you very much. Just for me, the kind of overwhelming sort of theme is, to be honest, if there was one lesson for me that links it all, it is the coordination is key one. I feel like Dr. Teravaninthorn's point about, and many of you, about thinking holistically across sectors in terms of solutions. So solutions like EV, it's not about transport, not about energy, it's a combined thing on solutions. So that's about coordination. Also, the government and private sector is also about effective coordination, right? Solving coordination failures and the role of government for that. Also, transmission and generation, lack of coordination. And then I think ADB's point, the reforms they're doing is a challenge to us that MDBs, and we'd hope MCDF can have a role in trying to help support this coordination, but we need to look at ourselves first and think, actually, are we effectively coordinated first around solutions and in these ways? We need to sort out our own house before we can then go and help our partners. So be interesting to hear how ATB gets on with their restructuring on this. So thank you very much. Just then to finish by saying three things. First of all, this isn't the end of the event. As you know, we've got the reception coming up. So any points you disagree with or you want more information from the speakers, please come up and talk to them during the reception. And it's just going to be outside in the atrium of AIIB. Secondly, for MCDF, this publication is not the end of our work on climate smart connectivity, it's just the beginning. So we want to build on it in a number of ways. So first of all, we want to ensure that these lessons are incorporated in the connectivity projects that we're supporting through our MDB partners all around the world. So with AIIB, but also with African Development Bank, Latin American Development Bank, CAF, and the Africa Finance Corporation. Secondly, we want to broaden the analysis to include more connectivity sectors. So currently in this, we've got railways, roads, shipping, and energy, how to be climate smart on those sectors. But going forwards, it would be great to add in aviation and also telecommunications. So look for opportunities on that. Thirdly, then we're keen to deepen the analysis where possible. So informed by these kind of discussions, to keep thinking, what are the key issues and how can we have more practical advice to our partner governments and financiers. So any thoughts you have on those agendas going forwards, please let us know. I know many in the room here, and sorry there hasn't been a chance to hear from you, are experts on this in different respects. So we'll look forward to working together with you. And so the final thing then is just to say thank you to everyone who's been involved in this event. First of all, to our co-hosts, China Ministry of Finance, AIIB, WRI, to the excellent speakers, and then to the facilities management company, DRC, for setting up this great location for us. The event caterers, which we'll be benefiting from in a moment, the production vendor, Robust, the translators, who are around the corner and some of you have been benefiting from. And then finally, my colleagues, in particular, Victoria and Lulu, for all their hard work on this. So thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to carrying on the conversation. Thank you.